Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Daily Devotional. So, for our Daily Devotional today, there's an article that was posted. I think it was yesterday. There's no date on it, but it was. I found it yesterday, and the article is about something that Nick Saban said in his press conference. Nick Saban is the head football coach at the University of Alabama. And the title of the article is Nick Saban calls out Alabama players for lack of resiliency, says many still get overwhelmed by their feelings. And so there's a couple things that I want to notice in this article. Obviously, Nick Saban is talking from the perspective of a football coach, and I am personally not an Alabama fan. Obviously, I'm a South Carolina fan, South Carolina Gamecocks. Nick Saban, he's been very, very successful as a personality. I don't really like him from the perspective that he kind of operates as almost like a business, a CEO type of thing, which is fine. It's been successful for him, and that's great. But he's very, very blunt and very, very outspoken. He doesn't mince words with stuff. And so it's interesting some of the stuff he says about some of his players. He says, so the article says, Nick Saban has never been one to mince words in his press conferences. If he needs to send a message to his players, he has no problem doing it publicly. On Wednesday after practice, he called out certain players for a lack of resiliency. As you can see in the video below, we're not going to watch the video below. Starting at the beginning, Saban says many Alabama players are still overwhelmed by their feelings and feeling sorry for themselves as the difficult fall camp wears on. And so this is some of the stuff that he says. You know, people can't be overwhelmed by their circumstances, he said. You get overwhelmed by constantly talking about negative things, how I feel, how tired I am, whatever it is. Fall camp practice at this time of year without playing a game every week is very challenging. When you talk about that stuff all the time, it just creates an epidemic of the poor me's. The season is going to create tremendous challenges in every game. We've got lots of losable games we play, lots of challenges out there, whether we play at home or on the road. You've got to have resiliency to be able to overcome difficult circumstances. That's one of the things fall camp is designed to do for players. The mental toughness, the self-discipline that you need to be able to make good decisions about what you're doing and what you don't do, and sense of purpose-driven quality. Something is really, really important to me, and I'm going to make the decisions and choices now to create the right habits so I have a chance to be successful and do the right things. I think we're still working on that with a lot of our players. We've got some guys who do a great job of that, set a good example for that, but we've got a lot of players who still get overwhelmed by their feelings. We're going to do what we can to get more and more of the players on our team to find a mindset that you need to sustain difficult circumstances, to find a mindset that you need to sustain difficult circumstances and overcome adversity in games and challenges in games sure to come. So, I thought this was, obviously, as a head coach, saying this about his players, and again, Nick Saban's arguably, he might be one of the best. And it's, I read through that, and it's in application to football. But football coaches often relate how that preparing for football games and just the game of football can help prepare young men to deal with life. And certainly you see a great example of this, Nick Saban kind of applying that the same way. But if you look at the stuff that I've highlighted, it could easily be obviously he's not talking about this from a spiritual perspective, but if you look at just the stuff we're highlighting, could easily be applied to the spiritual life. The danger of a lack of resiliency, people being overwhelmed by their feelings, feeling sorry for themselves, and the need to realize you can't be overwhelmed by your circumstances. We can't get overwhelmed by constantly talking about negative things, how I feel, how tired I am. You talk about all that stuff, it creates an epidemic of poor me's. You have to have resiliency to overcome difficult circumstances, mental toughness, self-discipline. You need to make good decisions about what you're doing, what you don't do. You have purpose-driven quality. And I really like this last one. Something is really, really important to me, and I'm going to make the decisions and choices now to create the right habits so I have a chance to be successful and do the right things. I just think it's such a great parallel to the spiritual life and the need for us to recognize that there are a lot of things in this world and in this life that we're going to deal with that they're going to be difficult. They're going to be hard. They're going to be the types of things that are going to challenge us. And if we just sit around feeling sorry for ourselves, or if we're constantly full of negative thoughts and poor me's, and we're overwhelmed, or we're letting our emotions overwhelm us, then we're not going to be able to be serving God the right way with the right mind and attitude. And it made me think of Job. And of course, we've talked about Job a lot, but consider what James says about Job in James chapter 5 and in verse 10. My brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. This is right after he tells the brethren, be patient until the coming of the Lord. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another. And then he talks about the prophets, and he talks about Job and his perseverance. Job could have so easily been overwhelmed by his emotions. He could have so easily been full of negative thoughts, so much so, and poor me, so much so that he cursed God and died. But he didn't. And when you talk about the type of stuff that Nick Saban's describing here, having resiliency, instead of filling your mind with negative things, filling your mind with positive things. What sort of things are pure? What sort of things are true? What sort of things are praiseworthy? Meditate on these things, Philippians 4 verse 8. Mental toughness, self-discipline. Make decisions and choices now to create the right habits so that later you have a chance to be successful and do the right things. Not be overwhelmed by your feelings. Have a mindset to sustain through difficult circumstances and overcome adversity. All of that is described by what Job says, or what happens to Job and what James says about Job. Take the prophets, and certainly James brings up any of the prophets, all of them in doing God's will. What an incredible example of perseverance and resilience in the face of people who didn't want to listen. Okay, God sent these men to talk to these people who generally, by and large, rejected the prophets. They didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear it. And the prophets suffered incredibly at the hands of their own people for simply doing what God told them to do. And so it's just a very interesting perspective, and certainly just another example of how often, even though football's just a game, and there's a lot of different elements of our physical life that certainly we could say it's just this or it's just that, but there are certainly broader or even more meaningful applications to some lessons we learn in the process of some things, like the game of football and getting them prepared for a tough season, being able to have that mindset of endurance, of focusing on the ultimate goal, which for a football team obviously would be to win your games and to win a championship one day at the end of the season. That's kind of how we as Christians have to live our lives. Each day is practice. It's a day that we are facing adversity. when temptation challenges us, that's kind of like, it's not a game, but it's kind of like where the rubber meets the pavement, meets the road type of thing. That's when we're actually utilizing the things that we've applied from God's Word, is when we're being challenged, or when our faith's being challenged, when we're being tempted. And then as we go through those things, the goal is for us to faithfully endure those things and then let them make us stronger, so that one day we finally get that crown or trophy that we're so wanting. So I saw this article. I read the words that he said, and I thought, man, that could easily, just as easily, be applied to spiritual thoughts and spiritual considerations as it is for football. So I hope that's something to think about, something to kind of put in our minds, especially, we often get tired. Not just, certainly we get tired sometimes in life. Wears us down. COVID and all the maybe loved ones and people we know maybe who've gotten COVID, maybe even some who are struggling terribly, maybe even some who have passed away, add to that obviously stresses of life with maybe we have children and getting them at school and trying to take all the precautions and going to work. All of that stuff wears you down over time. And obviously, as a Christian, in order to be able to go through all of that and still be faithful, still have a positive outlook and a positive mentality and attitude in our service to God, that takes work. It's not something that's going to come easily, and it's not something that is natural. I think naturally, as human beings, we tend to be more poor me. We tend to be overwhelmed by our emotions, and sometimes that's why we have to have these coping skills. We have to have these outlets for us to be able to deal with some of the stress. And obviously, prayer goes a long way in that. Having our brethren to talk to goes a long way in that. Understanding and chalking up all of the stuff we go to as being part of physical life, knowing one day in heaven we're not going to have to deal with this stuff. That pushes us through. And certainly knowing that no matter what we face, it's nothing new. People of faith have been facing these types of tribulations and adversities since man was created. People who sought to be faithful to the Lord have always faced these types of problems. And if they can do it and remain faithful and remain focused on heaven and serving God and serving their neighbor, so can we. All right, that's the daily devotional for you today. So, Lord willing, Monday will be our next daily devotional at 6:30. I hope to see you all then. Thanks, everybody.